Hello, Lisa. Welcome to the communication, and it's a privilege to invite you to this interview on what not to do in entrepreneurship. You have an amazing journey, and as recent as becoming the founder of the first women-owned bank, um, to being a wife and a chef yourself of a very successful chef, as husband and wife. Entrepreneurs have a lot to learn from you and your journeys, both as a chef and, may I add to that, the journey of you as a human being also, which I am so proud to share during our conversation. So my welcome to this platform. I wanted to really ask you, as you began your transformation from a child to becoming, going to school, becoming an entrepreneur, what was in your assessment during that time being an entrepreneur means to you?
Well, it's interesting. Nobody ever asked me that question, so it's a good one. I also want to clarify, so I'm not a chef. My husband is a chef, and I always was responsible for the business and hospitality side, although we share the hospitality side, but really he is the chef in the family. I'm the eater in the family. And it's actually been quite good in COVID to have a private chef.
Yes.
Not really cooked very much, but it's interesting. So, I'm trying to think. So I was named after my great aunt, and she was born here. So she was from New York, and she had polio as a child, and they grew up. They were a very poor immigrant Jewish family on the Lower East Side, like a pretty typical story. And she never let, and I never met her, but this was like our family lore, is that she never let that stop her, that she was the most amazing, like the smartest person. She learned how to write using a pencil with her mouth. She went to college at a time, during the Depression, when you didn't see very many women, let alone women who were crippled, go to college. She went to Hunter College on a full scholarship, and her whole family supported her, and the whole family was kind of, I think they were activists for sure. And my other great aunt was kind of a political organizer. So I was named after this aunt that didn't let anything ever get in her way, and I was always told about her. So in my childhood, I grew up with that, and I also grew up with very idealistic parents who believed in social change, and they also just believed that anything you wanted to do, if you set your mind to it, you could do it. So I think that I didn't grow up in a very wealthy family, but we grew up with like a great value for education and books, and just ideas, and caring about values and ideals. And so that was always very dear to my heart. And so that's what my childhood was like. In fact, I was just recently visiting with my parents outside during COVID, and I was remembering that when I was little, when Nixon was reelected, I remember how upset I was, because we had a class election and he didn't win in our class election. I grew up in Evanston, Illinois, which is a pretty liberal community. I'm a very liberal person, so you'll just have to bear with me on that one. But I was really curious to know what it was like for my parents, because, we have an election that's coming up, and I'm very concerned about it. And I was just asking them what was it like when their candidate didn't win the election. And so we were talking about that. But I grew up in a very values-based home, and we really valued equality. was very, very important. And my parents were, very enamored with different social justice movements. And so that's kind of the people that we revered growing up. So I think that's where it came from.
So when your husband, I guess at age of 27 or something like that, he was named to be the first executive chef at the Four Seasons in Boston, and it was the youngest chef ever to be entered in that regime. And
you did your homework. That was a long time ago.
Yes, but after that, you guys began he did a couple of restaurants, and which were named by Condé Nast as the best restaurant in the world, the hottest restaurant in the world, and then you had the James Beard's, one of the best upcoming restaurants. From that to the DMK and the MK restaurants that you created as entrepreneurs. Tell me, or tell the readers, what created that transformation for you and your husband, especially because your fundamental of life is you want to be equal in everything, in partnership. And so I'm sure you guys didn't make that decision, by individually. So that's what I'd like to know.
Okay. Well, I think that everything that Michael and I have done, and that I have done individually, that we've really succeeded on, has been things that has been done through love, I will say. Michael and I both have a love of hospitality as a value and as a virtue. Actually, a chef who came to us as a cook, who's now a chef, named his restaurant Virtue after the virtue of hospitality, which we all embraced as a company. And we didn't really just embrace that value of hospitality only towards our guests, but towards each other. And I think that was one of the most important things, the values that Michael and I brought to the table. Like Michael and I think, bonded initially. I met him when I was a waitress and he was a chef, but he loved my social activism. I worked with homeless kids during the day, and I waited tables at night. And I think that we both value, we value that. So when we think about a value of something like equality, we valued all the people that worked with us to achieve success. So our first restaurant was really exciting because Michael, I was in graduate school at the time, and we had a 1 and a 2-year-old, and Michael was really ready to go off on his own. And I was just excited for him because he had been talking about this and thinking about this for years. And we spent many, many evenings with our architects, having them over for dinner and just talking about what a place would feel like. Like that was the most important, like what did it feel like? And then what were our values are around that? And Michael's training at the Four Seasons, which is, I think, an example of a really fabulous company that both values its employees and its guests, so much so that there's not necessarily a need for a union. So it's like that kind of mentality. Michael also trained under Rich Melman, and both learned the hospitality and systems. It's kind of like they go hand in hand. So it's we had a discipline to systems and making sure that we followed the systems, that everybody that worked for us followed the systems which we developed, and that also that everybody understood what the philosophy was of the restaurant, which was to recognize people as individuals, to value people's time, and also to acknowledge that mistakes were always going to be that were going to always happen, and to accept accountability and use opportunities for mistakes to kind of reaffirm an emotional bond with either a guest or with our employees. And so we had a very open door policy, where everybody understood, that we could talk about what was going on and that we weren't afraid to be wrong. So I think that those are some of the things. Does that make sense? I don't know if
Yeah, no, see, what is important here is in your bank now, and I'm going to come to that in a little minute, that you are a chief experience officer, where you're working towards funding, getting the funds done and closed in, I believe in the first quarter of 2021. Or that's what, and you have an amazing team that you have put together. As a entrepreneur, because of your partnership with your husband, a lot of the women, and this is something of a question that I have for you, the world and the dynamics that you put in, the 30 million small businesses, and the women are now owning nearly 25% of that. Why aren't more women owning the restaurant business as compared to men? And what is that you see the deficiencies in terms of that? Is it history or is there something else?
I mean, I think it's a lot of, I think it's a lot of things. I mean, traditionally restaurants were run by men, right? And you didn't really see women in positions of authority. I mean, I think I didn't know Michael when he went to the Culinary Institute, but he said that there were very few women there. So you didn't see a lot of women in the restaurant business. And so that means there's not a lot of mentors for women in the restaurant business. And I'm sure that and many people have seen and read books like Kitchen Confidential. I mean, I worked in I'm trying to think, I worked in restaurants as a waitress where you did see a lot of women. There were rarely women managers when I started waiting tables, and there was rampant sexism. I mean, women were sexually harassed all the time, and the kitchen wasn't a good place for a woman to go in if you had to, in many restaurants that I had worked in. And one of the things that I really tried to do at MK was create an environment where women could succeed at the highest level. And I'm very proud of that, actually. One of the things that I'm most proud of both is the number of women that came to our restaurant with very little management experience or none at all. And we trained and became managers, and then general managers, then director of operations. I'm very, very proud of that. Also, women that worked for us, Mindy Siegel, who won a James Beard Award for her restaurant, Hot Chocolate, which we helped her start. We created an environment where women could have mentorship, both from myself and my husband. We created an environment that was where we cared about all employees and we didn't tolerate harassment, So you need to have an environment that is safe and has mentorship, especially in an industry where it's not always so safe to be a woman. So that's one of the things that I think that is a reason why I think you're seeing more and more women. I mean, the more women you're seeing be in position of power, I mean, you see someone like Alice Waters, who's so amazing, open up Chez Panisse when she did, and have the employees have ownership, have childcare in the restaurant. I mean, we had all kinds of policies in our restaurant where everybody got paid vacation, everybody had paid sick leave. We had 401ks at a time when hardly any small businesses, and it's still very hard for small businesses to do that. So, that's one of the reasons, I think. But I think you are seeing more and more women go into this field.
So, as a what not to do in the business of restaurants, whether it is for men or women, you have had DMK restaurants, MK restaurants, and a lot of success, but success didn't come easy. So what are some of the what not to do lessons? in the business of restaurants that you would share with the readers or with the people who watch your video?
So one of, there's a couple. And I mean, I'm trying to think what not to do. Well, what to do, maybe we could start with, one of the things that I think Michael and I did really well is that we listened to people who really understood the business. And I would say what not to do is to not listen. Like, it's really important to listen. I've had I've had many friends open restaurants out of pure passion. I think, you have to start there. But I think when you don't have a background and a training in any kind of a discipline, to accounting systems, to inventory systems, right? So it's very, very hard to succeed in this industry, which is an industry, of nickel and dimes. It's very, very hard. And it's just, we had friends open restaurants, and I would see them not adhere to these systems. I don't know. I think not listening to experts is something that you should not do. As soon as we could afford it at MK, we had consultants come in and look at our accounting systems, look at all of the systems, and revamp some of the things that we needed, like find areas that we could be more efficient in. And then we were, we listened to what they said. We didn't. Sometimes it's hard. I think people come in and consult and they see some things, but because you so own what your way, and you can be very invested in being right, that you don't want to listen. And I think listening to experts about systems is one of the reasons why we were able to be very successful and replicate our success in other ventures. That's one thing.
Are there other ventures other than the bank that you and your husband are involved in, other than social, of course, entrepreneurship, which of course I'm
not for-profit ventures. Michael and I are involved in not-for-profits, and we've also had done some political fundraising, but no, we don't own other businesses. We don't.
So, restaurant business, I interviewed one of the greatest chefs of the Indian restaurants, which are more and more becoming vegetarian. Most people are, and things like that. Mm-hmm. And it was, quite a learning experience from how they evolve the food and stuff like that. What made him evolve the food in American food, and restaurant is big business. What happens is somebody cooks a dish with a passion very well, and people say, "Oh, the next thing you should open a restaurant," and they really think that they are now qualified to open a restaurant. And because restaurant seems to be like a cash business, you buy the material in the morning, you sell it in the evening, quick inventory. But there is a lot that goes into it, and just like you said, your friends who were said to be opening a restaurant, but and it is a big sort of a subject of interest of entrepreneurs who more people think of opening restaurants than in it. So as a restaurant person who has gone through those, what would you tell these entrepreneurs? Of course, listen to the story is afterwards. But not every passion who can make great eggplant can become transformed into an owner, right? So, or more to a successful owner. What would those qualities be that would require that entrepreneur to who is passionate about, or who thinks he wants to be, or he or she, of course, wants to be in the restaurant business? It is better learned from somebody who has been in that business than somebody outside the business.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would encourage people to really get training on both sides and do it. Michael learned from some of the best companies in the United States for sure before, and was a partner in another restaurant company before we went off on our own. And I don't, so many people I see don't always take the opportunity to get the training or even to take the extra time. I mean, we have had many people that work for us leave and open their own ventures. And one of the things that we did used to offer was, like, if they want to come in on their own time and learn how to do some of the skill set that they don't know how to do, whether that's front of the house or back of the house, you should really ideally know both. I didn't always see it happen. You know, it's hard. Like Michael put in a lot of extra time to learn all the skill sets. For example, he would go in at 4 o'clock in the morning with this guy, Steve Ottman, who was a partner at Let Us Entertain You, so he could understand how to do inventory systems. Not a lot of chefs have that incredible, like, drive for knowledge. And so it's not, you know, restaurants are very romantic. And there's, like, great movies about them, like, oh, I cooked this wonderful thing, and then, you know, I have a restaurant. I mean, we just recently rewatched that movie Big Night, where they make that wonderful, you know, the Italian restaurant, but they didn't know anything about being in business. Like, they were great, really, really great cooks. And sometimes, I mean, like, you can hit it, like, sometimes you can have a small place and you might be super passionate and it's amazing, and you don't need that. But we, I mean, we were careful and we were thoughtful about it. We had a 1 and a 2-year-old and a mortgage, and it was a big deal. And Michael had been working in the industry. I mean, I'm trying to think, he was 35 when we opened MK. So he had been working for 10 years as a chef and a manager in the hospitality industry. So that was really his background. My background was very different. But if somebody is looking to go into the industry, I would really, really encourage them to have some really good mentorship. And if they work in the industry, to actually go to the owner and say, I would like to learn from you. And so I guess what not to do would be to just think because you cook, you know, because you're a great cook, that you can actually run a business, you know. And usually having a partner who can look after the side of things that you don't know is also a very helpful thing, I think, for any business. But I mean, the business that I know most well is the restaurant business. So
moving away, I know that in your life, your husband has been incredibly impactful in sort of guiding and molding your career and your thinking together. What are the other people that you feel that have been influential to you, to guiding now that you're opening, you become one of the founders of the first women bank, you know, after a long time in Chicago?
That's a really good question. I think that my first boss, who's now the president of the Joyce Foundation, has always been a guiding influence in my life. And I worked for her right out of college at the Chicago Children's Museum. And we've remained friends for all these years. And she's somebody that I greatly admire. I admire her career trajectory. I admire her commitment to social change and activism. I admire her style. She's a very fearless leader. And she's somebody that I've always gone to. And she was actually one of the first people when I had this idea that I spoke to about it. I mean, because it was a very outside, it doesn't really, it's very outside of the box. Although I just heard, I'm trying to think, I just heard a podcast this morning with, his last name is Sonnenschein, who just wrote a book called Stretch. And he was talking about how outsiders can have really good ideas and can solve problems because they're not so mired in it. And I was like, oh my God, that was so validating. So it was interesting because I went into business with my husband really in a way that made sense for our family, and I didn't really think it was going to be a almost 20-year commitment. I really thought that I was going to go back to graduate school and probably have a career in academia, which I was really loving at the time. And so, the mentorship I was getting was in a very different direction. And I think one of the reasons why I was excited about creating a bank was I've always been very interested in creating a community of women entrepreneurs. And as you mentioned, there are not a lot of women restaurant owners. I didn't find there were very few in Chicago when I started. I mean, there was Carrie Nahabibi, and there weren't as many women chefs as there are now, certainly. And I didn't really have a big community. I also didn't have a lot of time because very few restaurateurs have a lot of children, and we have 4, so it was we were really running around a ton. So I think I think Ellen was an incredible mentor to me, and she was definitely somebody that I looked to when I had this idea. And by that time I had established myself in business, so many of my friends were also very well established and in business, in different ventures. And so I would also go to, I ran the idea by them as well, and they were very excited about it.
So in the Women Bank that you are creating now,
the first women's bank,
bank, yes, the first women bank, your purpose is to provide ease of capital or ease of access to capital to these entrepreneurs of hair salons and things like that. If as a creator of a bank, the purpose of the bank is just to help the community, of course, but what are some of the things that you would ask those businesses that would come to you for loans not to do?
I would ask them not to do. I would ask them to I mean, it's so funny because I'm a very I always ask what to do. I mean, I would ask them not have good, I would ask them to have strong accounting systems. I would ask them to have a strong discipline to HR systems and make sure that they, had proper audits. I think that's hard. I know.
Discipline. You should not be undisciplined about a business.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I also would ask them to not shy away from understanding the areas in which they're very profitable and also understanding the areas in which they might be able to become more profitable, and to look at, and to really understand their P&L as a way that shows them not just be excited if your top line revenue is really high. I mean, one of the things that really helped us achieve success and why I was so excited about starting a bank is because my banker was very helpful to me. I mean, my banker saw that we were a very successful restaurant. We paid our first restaurant, we paid our investors back in 13 months. And so one of my jobs with no training at all was how do you manage cash flow and how do you optimize returns for investors? And that also meant being thoughtful about when I was having the responsibility for this money, what was I doing to put it to work? And my banker was very, very helpful in giving me different options about how to best maximize returns. And as a woman, I needed to develop as me, I guess I'm a very relationship-driven person. And I noticed that I think women, before they're comfortable talking about money, want to know who they're talking to. And I've had anyway, so understanding really not just, even if you're profitable, that's great. How can you be really more profitable, and not being really afraid to dive into that, and also to ask for the help that you need, and not be embarrassed about not understanding certain financial terms or acronyms or practices. And I was able to do that because I developed a working relationship with my banker, who was my same banker for 10 years. So we got each other, and so he could turn me on to all different ways to work with money. And then I became very comfortable with money, and also comfortable about working with all my managers at the restaurant about how to really take ownership. Like that's the other thing. I would encourage any business owner to take full ownership, and then teach their employees to take ownership of all their profit centers.
So it's funny.
Like The Great Game of Business. I love that book.
But it when you speak, something really just comes out. Women in general manage money at home. Women are responsible for the third largest economy in the world. The first is the US, second is Japan, and of course now China, and the third is the women-controlled economy, right? But although women control the economy, they are uncomfortable in the language of money in the world of business. Right. You see the dilemma here, right? They know how to account for the soap, they know how to account for the stuff, but when it comes to applying that, from what you're saying, it becomes difficult, or they need some level of guidance or some level of handholding in the process to become more methodical in the business, so banks can provide them the assistance that they need to build successful businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I would also push back on that. I don't know that I would say hand-holding. Like to me, I wasn't necessarily looking for hand-holding, but I was looking for...
No, but you are hand-holding, you are already...
somebody to not talk down to me, and also that I felt comfortable being vulnerable with asking questions.
Yeah.
Money is really, money is tricky, because women were considered property for most of history, right? So it's only really, women in the US have only been allowed legally to have credit in their name since 1973, and in business 1983. So if you look at a history of money, and you really think about when the first banks started, which were in the 1500s, they were actually created literally off the backs of women. If I remember this correctly, because one of the things when I wanted to open a bank, I read A History of Money, and I really loved it. And I think it was that in Florence, the government wanted to build bridges and roads, and so they proposed that families that were needing dowries for their daughters, they could invest a certain amount of money, and the state would pay them 5% each year. And by the time the girl who was born was 18, there would be enough money. So literally, women have been bought and sold, right? And women have not been allowed to own, to have property in their name. And if they did, it was very hard fought. And also, it's intimidating. I will tell you, to me, I don't want to speak for all women, but I invest with a group of men. I'm the only woman there. And the only reason I was invited is because my husband wasn't interested, and it didn't bother me. In fact, at the time, I didn't notice it because I had so many kids and restaurant, and I really was focused on, I wanted to be able to get into some deals and invest. But, when I start thinking about it, I think it's very hard when you don't see people that look like you. And it's also something that's so fraught, because I think for me, money is security. And if I don't know how to use it, and I don't see people that look like me, it might be difficult for me. So I think that, and also feeling judged for not knowing, even though how would I know? How are women supposed to know if when they come in, they're not treated the same as a man, and it's well documented that they're not, and that it's well documented that women, when they apply for business loans, get worse terms, worse rates. And so, the idea came to me because as a business person, I was like, this is a giant untapped market that is not treated well, and that we will be incredibly profitable investing in businesses that people aren't even looking at because maybe somebody, isn't dressed like there's so many things that women are judged on that I couldn't even tell you exactly what all of them are. I mean, I could have a perfect business suit and speak the language, and I still might be judged as not competent or not serious. So, I mean, I think that the bank, I think people are so excited about it. I get so many emails. I get calls from very accomplished. I got a call the other day from a doctor with a giant practice in Chicago, and she can't wait to move over to our bank. So I think seeing people that look like them in positions of power, I think our name says a lot about who we are. But we don't want to, we don't have an attitude, we just have a welcoming attitude, which goes back to how I feel about hospitality. And it was the same thing, like even in our restaurant, we didn't want to create an intimidating environment for anybody. And even though my husband was a well-known chef, and the the restaurant at the time when we opened it was very beautiful, and it could have been kind of an intimidating place, like if you weren't used to a sophisticated dining experience. But we also embraced people and really met people exactly where they were. And so we were wonderful for many gay couples had all of their celebrations at our restaurant before gay marriage was allowed. You know what I mean? Because we were like, yes. And, people, before gluten-free was a thing, I think one of the first gluten-free websites had us on as like a great place because we didn't look down at dietary restrictions. So I think I hope that what I bring to the table is a sincere ability to want to meet women and men where they're at and shape a banking experience that helps them maximize their profitability, and they become very successful and they continue to do business with us. Like it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. So I have a curious question for you in
Yes.
in that space. Most men, women and men keep joint accounts together, and therefore men know what the women are transacting, or they think no. In your bank, you are going to only have women accounts, and therefore the men would not have any access to accounts that were maintained in the women's banks, or is that not the case?
No, that's not the case at all. Our bank is for everybody. It's not only for women.
Okay.
At all. And it depends. I mean, if you want to open up a joint account in our bank, you can open up a joint account.
Okay,
and if you want to open up an individual account, you would open up an individual account. It's funny because our friend Eric jokes, like my husband had no interest in managing our money, and he doesn't know where anything is, ever. In fact, my friend, who's another chef, said, you have to really organize everything because if you die, Michael won't know where to find anything. And I was joking. I just thought it was funny, but I don't really know. I don't know how individual people do their finances, but I do think, I know people that have their own accounts. I know people that have joint accounts. I think
but that's not the purpose of your bank.
Thing.
It is not meant purely for women. It's just
not at all. No, what we're
would you
saying
give loans? Would you give loans to other than women also, or would you just give loans?
Yes,
to
absolutely. In fact, probably women-owned businesses, according to the most current research that we have, are accessing only 16% of commercial lending. So we hope to certainly up that. We will open as a commercial bank, and we think that as having a focus on a woman-led approach, which we think is like really the approach of the future, that will help get those numbers to rise, but we're an equal, the bank will be an equal opportunity lender to anybody. And I imagine we will be doing loans for all different, we're focused on SBA lending. So
yeah, but wouldn't you have the same challenge then? Wouldn't you have the same challenge? Because you just said that, money was not a level of comfort. What are the right words? A space of comfort. Therefore, and men are used to it. Now you bring the same people in the same, it's like bringing a minor league and a major league person to a professional game, and then you expect the minor league person to become as good as a major league person. How would you manage that? Because in that case, you are going to go by the rules of protecting your currency and limiting the risk equally, because you're an equal opportunity lender.
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that our bank will do, which is really exciting, is we're going to have networking. So we're going to be more than a bank. One of the things I think banks actually do well is they kind of do networking and referrals on a very informal basis, but we're actually going to do it on a more formalized basis. So we're both we have an incredible network of seed investors, and we're developing an advisory board. And the purpose of that is going to be exactly your point, to take people that may have been in a more minor league and give them access to great mentorship if they need it, to connect them with chambers of commerce, to connect them with, all the resources. So one of the things, there was a study recently in Chicago about why both women and minorities were having trouble accessing capital. And there are many different resources, but there wasn't one place that was a connective hub. And one of the things I think that this bank can be is a connective hub for people to help them grow their businesses. And to have we're going to have different networking events. There'll be education. And I think those things are really important, and will be, to businesses so that they can grow. And I think that men have many informal networks, whether it's on the golf course or it's, through different activities like playing poker, where you have a group of guys that that's one of the things that I experienced, is that many of our investors in our first restaurant and in our second restaurant then bring deals to the table that we get to see. And so we're hoping to kind of expand that. And I talked to a lot of different women about that, about just formally connecting to look at deals. So one of the things that this bank can be is this really great connective hub around those things. But really, the bank is going to be focused on SBA lending. Our CEO was the former head of the SBA.
She came from the Barack Obama's administration of SBA,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, she sure did.
So thank you for taking so much time, walking me through this, walking the people through the emotions of being a woman entrepreneur, and then also being on the restaurant side, because that's quite enlightening. I know you asked me some questions. For the record of this, are there some other questions or any same questions that you would like to ask for me, as a part of concluding this interview?
Well, I'm curious how many, of the people that you're talking to for this book, what percent are women business owners compared to men?
So, I think that it would be more of 50-50.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And what's the range of the type of businesses?
So we are the movie from technology businesses, medical businesses, to Hollywood, to Bollywood, to that landscape of it.
Uh-huh.
So it's in the beauty space. We have worked with financial institutions, people who created large debt funds or large funds, corporate funds, to people like Carissa who created entrepreneurial organizations. And one of the things that we want to try to, it's not because of the 50-50ness of the balance. It is because the thinking of women in the world of entrepreneurship needs to be embraced, in my opinion, for the thinking of men. Because the next generation of successful entrepreneurs, by percentages, will be more of women. The fundamental reason being women understand how to create relationships much better than men. The sort of the ace card the men had before was the ability of the historical business knowledge. But all of that is now available on Google or in talks and stuff like that. So the disappearance of the martini lunches, allows the ground to be flattened more and enables the women's feeling instinct. You do business with people because you feel good about them, not because, the guy has a better database of things. And so that database removal from being in the brain to bring in the available, including artificial intelligence, which is a sort of database, would allow and would enable a rapid expansion of women entrepreneurs, because they can create more successful businesses, because people will do business because you feel good about it. And there is no better passion than a woman's knowledge of motherly feelings that will give them that comfort. And that they cannot simulate in artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think it's really, I think it's a very exciting time, actually, as some of the historic institutions are not proving to be as worthwhile or even as efficient or make as much sense as maybe we once thought that they did. Mm-hmm. That I think there is an incredible opportunity to do business in a different way, to really value relationships. I think your point about artificial intelligence is really interesting, right? Because there's a lot of things that can just get done efficiently that don't even need people to do them, right? And so we're left to think about things, like to do the things that we can do, to think, to have relationships. And I mean, to me, I'm such a relationship-driven person, so that's exciting. I mean, I think investing in people is like the best thing that anybody can do. So yeah, I think it's great.
And I get that, when I interview also, and obviously it's a wide, diverse. And the thing that I'm trying to do in this book is to get the feeling of the entrepreneur struggle translated more into experience, rather than just talk about somebody's successes, and of course success is important, but path of success is more important than talk about the success. And so
yes, I mean, one of the things that we've done, especially with restaurants that we helped start from people that came from us. And recently it's been with one chef specifically, is like looking back and saying, like, here's what we really thought we did wrong. Like, learn from our mistakes, like really learn from our mistakes, be really strategic. Like, we were not strategic about PR because it wasn't, I mean, we did our restaurant for just a love of what we were doing. And we were so surprised by the accolades that we received that we didn't really know what to do about it or think about how to think about it strategically, and now we're really advising like our friends that we care about to really think strategically, how to think strategically about things and how to learn from our mistakes. And the same thing like with the systems, like HR systems, so important. Saves you so much headache at later dates.
Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for
sharing. Well, thank you for having me. It was fun. I don't really get to sit down and reflect in this way very often.
Thank you so much. We will be in touch with you, Lisa.